One day, Percy arrived late to Brendam docks with an important coal delivery where a certain dockside crane looked down on him disapprovingly. "What time do you call this, eh? I thought you know by now that Bean Lake can cause these ships to miss the time with all that important cargo they had to wait for."
Don't blame me, Cranky.
It's no wonder why you little engines take so long to come all this way here. Not that I care less about, but if you weren't crawling along your rails, then things would have been quicker. And on time too.
That's not true. I'm always on time, and you know it.
Don't let Cranky get into your smoke box, me hearty. He's just grouchy from all the cold weather he's been enduring. Hard and sharp as a flint, like a lonesome man far out at sea, as I sometimes say. I heard that. Still, what took you so long to get here anyway?
It's George. He nearly caused me to have an accident at Sodor because of his carelessness.
George? Who's he?
A bad-tempered steamroller who wants nothing more than to get rid of our rails. And a big nuisance, too.
Not too long ago, an ice storm had caused a power outage in Sudbury. Boko had been borrowed as a backup generator for the town until the power lines are fixed within a few days. Whilst getting to the town hall, however, he had to drive along the road for a short distance, and his flange wheels had caused deep grooves in it. As a result, shortly after he had gone away for his overhaul, workmen had been sent to repair the road with new tarmac. And George was brought in to help pave it. He trundled backwards and forwards, spouting rude remarks about the engines.
"Railways are no good. Turn them into roads."
The other engines were very cross with this and find him rather insulting. And unsurprisingly, even the road vehicles disliked him, with the exception of Bulgy, the double-decker bus, due to him and George having a similar dislike of railways. During this time, George carelessly backed onto the crossing, causing Percy, who was on his way to Brendam docks, to just nearly collide with him. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but this resulted in the little green engine to become late with the coal delivery.
Just a little advice to you all. He is nothing but malicious. If he ever comes here, be sure to keep a watchful eye if he tries to cause trouble.
Aye, aye, Captain. We'll make sure that scurvy dog doesn't get up to no good. You have our word. Pah! Don't forget who you were speaking to. That little steamroller won't stand a chance against a mighty tall crane like me, unlike you lot down there.
You never even met George before. Besides, he's somebody you don't want to mess around with if he ever gives you grief.
Well, if he ever does, I'll just teach him a jolly good lesson, a thing or two. Then you needn't have worried about him. After all, nobody messes with good old Cranky. Ha 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 ha!
Really? I'd like to see you try then.
Two months later, the weather changed. And as the snow and frost melted, the docks grew busy again. However, there was a problem. Workmen had noticed several cracks in the main concrete dock in a few areas, and the manager knew they had to be mended. So he made a phone call with the Sodor Island Council. Cranky was busy loading some cargo when Bear arrived. On his well wagon was none other than George himself, grumbling as usual.
"It's about time. I've never felt this ride on rotten rails would be any worser."
Just be thankful you're here to work, George. You'll be crawling all the way here until evening, and it'd not been for one of us.
Hey you, down there! Who's this here you've brought?
That's George. He's come to mend parts of the docks. Mind yourself with him. He's not the most cooperative.
Oh, so you're this George fella. Now listen very clear. I've heard all about you, and needn't I remind you that you're in a busy dockyard where it's all work and no foul play. So you better make sure to stay out of the way of our work.
Pa, you make sure you don't get in my way, more like. Oh wait, how can you? You're just a worn-out piece of scrap metal stuck in one place.
Scrap metal? Why, you puny little bastard! I'll have you know that... Alright, cut it out, you two. We've got a very busy day today, and we don't want any nonsense. Especially from you, George.
I'll give him nonsense.
Soon George was unloaded and got straight to his job. He chuffered about the area, helping the workmen lay new concrete and flattening it down with his big roller. All the while, he still ranted on in his same old ways. Salty and Porter were careful to keep their distance from him while taking no notice. But Cranky was getting more agitated, which led to him and George exchanging insults.
Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up.
Alright, that's it!
Oi! Watch where you drop that thing, you stupid crane! You nearly hit me!
Well, can't you just shut your big loud mouth already? I'm trying to work up here, and your constant shit is giving me a headache!
I can rant whatever I like. My work is much more important than yours. An old creaking hunk of metal like you is only good enough for me to push into the sea easily.
Oi! You take that back, or else you'll be the one ending up in the bay yourself!
Hey, that's quite enough, you two. I don't care who started this argument, but we're already behind schedule, so we cannot waste a minute. Now back to work. Both of you.
George and Cranky both remained silent afterwards, glaring at one another coldly. Percy's no kidding. That steamroller really is nothing but a nuisance. And I'll rather listen to salty sea stories than his non-stop complaining any day. The next morning, George was preparing for more work. His driver, however, was a little distracted and accidentally drove him a little ways backwards instead of forward, straight into some crates, knocking them onto the tracks.
Whoops!
George then looked around. No one had seen him hit the crates, not even the dock manager who was talking to a workman. He then chuffed quietly away to avoid being seen. At that moment, Porter came backing up with some trucks. But he and his driver didn't see the crates until... Oh no! Bust my boiler! Shiver me axles! Engine overboard!
What happened here?
I don't know, sir. I was just shunting and then this happened.
No worries, Porter. I know it's not your fault, but whoever's responsible would leave me to find out. Meanwhile, Salty will have to continue the remaining work by himself while you're being inspected for damage.
He was right. It turned out that Porter's undercarriage had to be repaired after hitting the crates. Nobody else noticed from behind one of the main buildings, George was smirking to himself triumphantly. Cranky, however, had witnessed the entire accident from a distance above, and he was furious. That wretched steamroller! I'm going to teach him a lesson if it's the last thing he deserves! And he began forming a plan to pay George out. Later that day, a big ship had just come in from the mainland with a delivery of party decorations bound for stores in the town. As Cranky set to work unloading them, he noticed George working nearby from where he's standing, right next to the waterfront. He then decided to put his plan into action. He aimed very carefully for his target. Then he swung his crane arm with all his might. George was so startled he lurched backwards, knocking his driver out of the cab. Before he could think of anything else, he veered off the quayside and landing bunker first into the sea.
Oh! Help! Save me! It's really cold and I'm drowning!
Actually, George only landed on a jetty, so thankfully he didn't drown, but he didn't know that. Now it was Cranky's turn to smirk, but not for long.
What on earth is the meaning of this?
Uh-oh! The fat controller had just arrived for a meeting, and both he and the dock manager weren't very happy. Salty pulled up as well to see what the commotion was about.
Cranky! What in Godred's name were you playing at?
Well, you see, sirs, it's hard to put it in words, but...
We can already see what has happened. You have caused delay and disorder of that shipment over there just now. Do you have anything to say about this whole mess?
Yes. Sorry, sirs. But I was only trying to teach George a lesson for what he did to Porter. I saw him knock over the crates earlier that morning. Plus, he won't stop spewing out his infernal rubbish and complaining every chance he got.
That may be, Cranky. And while I understand you have your own limits, but you should have informed me first before pulling off that stunt. I expect better from you.
And as for you, George, you've been much worse given that you're the one responsible for Porter's accident.
But sir, it wasn't my fault.
I don't care for any of your excuses. Once Cranky lifts you out, I'll see to it that myself and the council would agree for you to stay in your shed until you can be allowed out again.
With that, both Crane and Steamroller shamefully said nothing else. Once George was lifted out of the water, he was put on a flatbed for Donald to haul him away. As for Cranky, he continued his work in silence while everyone helped to clean up the mess. That evening, Percy arrived with trucks of steel from the ironworks.
So, Cranky, I hear George being quite a handful for you, eh?
Don't ask.
But I also heard that you taught him a lesson, didn't you? After all, you said he wouldn't stand a chance against a mighty crane, eh? I guess you really owe us a small favor in getting rid of him.
Well, yes, I suppose I did then. Given that he is nothing more than a waste of scrap metal that never stops whinging and grumbling, if you ask me. Yes. Looking out for any fellow shipmates is enough to bring the gruffness of a dockside crane a heart of gold. Which, come to think of it, reminds me of an old sea legend long, long ago. Oh, don't you start this again, Salty. Now, if you all don't mind, I'm getting back to work in peace before I start to lose my mind.
Yep, that's our Cranky. A little too big for his hooks sometimes, but it doesn't make him any less useful than being a hard worker.